What is up, y'all? I'm Dr. Ray Gorman, physical therapist and owner of Engage Movement, a company that helps coaches and rehab professionals take their in-person process online. Give yourself a little bit of flexibility. I'm joined here with Dr. James Johnson of ATP, Performance and Physical Therapy.
Mhm.
And James was kind of a unique case of working together where, had kind of an online business, but then was also opening an in-person business and really just not like meshing the two. They were very siloed.
Mhm.
So James, tell everybody a little bit about like your background and how we got here.
Yeah, so like you said, I had the online presence through what was ATP Performance.
Yeah,
That started while I was in grad school. Just, as a natural kind of transition from in-person personal training, things got too busy. The internet's a great place, and I figured out, how to do that. And that had been going really well as a side gig to physical therapy. And then for perspective, I graduated in 2019 with my doctorate and then had been practicing since.
yeah.
But that was always just your standard outpatient orthopedics, while the personal training and online coaching was kind of like on the side. Um, but yeah, I mean, like you said, the interesting thing was because that business had been established for so long, I was very set and like, this is how I do this. And my physical therapy is something different because it always had been something
Yeah.
different. Like I legally had to make it something different. And then when the opportunity came about to try and blend the two, it was a struggle, partially because of just some legality issues in New York State,
Sure.
partly just because I wasn't really aware of how to do things, and that's ended up being why I ended up with you, was exactly because you had the solution to that very simply.
And just to like give a little context and background, you're very well niched in what you do and how you operate, right? Like you've been in competitive, the competitive physique world,
Mhm.
and bodybuilding world. Talk a little bit about that background and how that's kind of helped you really formulate like a solid messaging, because I think that that's something that a lot of people out there kind of struggle with.
hmm Yeah, so my niche, like you hinted at, is competitive bodybuilding. I work with any number of sports athletes. I was a team sport athlete
Yeah.
myself, but
Mhm.
really like what I'm passionate about most is rehabilitating bodybuilders or physique sport athletes or, strength sport athletes as well, just kind of as a side there. Um, what I found, first off, when we look at bodybuilding, there's the competitive side of things, and then there's the recreational side of things,
Mm,
right? And I would include anyone who is a avid gym goer with aesthetic goals as being a bodybuilder, right? So when I say bodybuilding, I'm not just working with the 300-pound guys on stage that are, completely different human beings, if human at all. It's anybody that like their goal, their sport, if you will, is I want to improve my physique and my body for aesthetic reasons, as well as longevity and health and all these other things. Um, what I love about it is such a flexible approach to rehabilitation, and I can address many different demographics of people underneath that umbrella, right? It's
yeah.
not just the collegiate 18 to 24-year-old soccer player who has an ACL issue, right? It is
Yeah.
very broad and all encompassing. But because of how flexible training is for hypertrophy, we get to have a lot of fun with what we can do. And that's what I really enjoy. So, yeah, I found myself in that niche. It's kind of expanded into some other small realms. But what I find the people that come to me are the competitive athlete because I am in that. I'm a competitor myself. I'm a coach for that myself. So a true competitive bodybuilder who gets injured more often than not is going to come to me or probably four or five other individuals that I know within the industry that do the same thing. Or it is more on the performance side of things. It's the individual who has lots of chronic injuries, but still wants to stay in good shape, still wants to
Mm,
maintain their aesthetic, and they don't feel comfortable going to the typical personal trainer or strength coach or bodybuilding coach because they don't have that understanding of how to modify programming when their
sure.
chronic injuries reflare up or if they have a new injury or post-surgical or anything like that.
And for those of you listening, James recently finished up our program, the Performance Provider Growth Model, which really allows for that flexibility, that systemization approach of, how do you take something that is niched and apply it to other demographics? And I think when you have a really clear and concise understanding of your overarching system, it becomes easy to then say, okay, this is how I would apply it to a competitive bodybuilder. This is how I would apply it to a recreational bodybuilder. This is how I would apply it to a recreational athlete. That's
Mhm.
something that I kind of noticed where, my background was quote unquote the fitness athlete, right? Powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, CrossFit, uh, high rocks now would fall under that demographic. But when I worked with field athletes, when I worked with softball players, when I worked with baseball players, when I worked with football players, like I was able to take those same concepts of, why is single leg strength important for my CrossFitter? Why is single leg strength important for my softball athlete? Why is standing lumbo-pelvic flexion important for my CrossFitter? Why is standing lumbo-pelvic flexion important for my softball athlete? Like you're really able to understand how to apply those things.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things that we often see is people operating in those silos, right? Like we talked about in the beginning, where it's like they think, okay, if I add an online component to my business, that means like it's kind of a separate business, it's kind of a separate revenue stream. Talk about a little bit of like the implementation that we went through to really like break that mindset for you and start to show you like, no, 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 like you can actually build a virtual aspect of the business with your in-person clientele. Because I think that's a big misconception people out there listening may have about what we do.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me to understand, and I'm very visual, so when I saw the presentations and I could see like the actual graph, it clicked right then and there.
Yeah.
But it's a continuity, right? And it's
Mhm.
not when someone starts online, they have to stay online, or someone starts in person, they have to stay in person. You tailor what they need to the offering that you're giving them. So the vast majority of my people, even if they're coming to me in person, they're very well versed in weight training and they need me for my knowledge to solve the problem at hand, but they don't need me to tell them how to do a squat or how to do a deadlift. I don't need to
Bingo.
be the personal trainer, right? So it's let's fix this problem. Let's do a, very, very in-depth evaluation. Let's look at everything. And that's kind of what you coach. It's the programming you're already doing, your lifestyle, your nutrition, your habits, everything. Break it all down, give my best guess and go implement it. And in the meantime, we're going
Mhm.
to follow up at these set, waypoints that we've determined based on your need. Is it monthly? Is it weekly? And that can be virtual or in person, depending on what they need, depending on their experience level and their requests.
You said something that I think stood out to me as well when I was practicing, and something that I felt very heavily, especially as I kind of moved into like the one-on-one realm with physical therapy, where there were some sessions where I was working with clients where I was just like, my gosh, you could just be doing this on your own.
Mhm.
And I think it's frustrating me more than it might be frustrating you. But what it was kind of doing for me, it was kind of ruining the experience of working with clients in person to an extent because I felt like this person what was so autonomous, but was being forced to come in to work with me really for the only reason being that like that's how my business was set up to generate revenue.
Mhm.
And I remember sometimes feeling like, my gosh, like I'm having to fill this session with kind of extra exercises that like I'm almost making up on the spot because unlike the traditional realm where the consumer like needs that hour of exercise because their training age is very low, like my ideal demographic is already going to the gym sometimes too much.
Mhm.
And so it just kind of felt counterintuitive to me to say, well, like, yeah, I know the solution is you're doing too much training, but when you come in with me, you're going to do the right amount of training, for it's going to be different, I promise.
Mhm.
Do you have any insight on that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the big thing that you hinted at was those individuals, because of the model, the insurance-based model, or even just
Yeah.
some cash-based models, that's what they're forced to do.
Yeah.
And it's very different. At least I felt very different in that situation versus the people now that come to me because they want to see me more frequently, right?
Very different.
It's very much like the values. Like I don't feel like I'm wasting their time if they're paying me to be their personal trainer because I offer both,
Yep.
right? Performance coaching, personal training, bodybuilding coaching, and rehabilitation.
Yeah.
If you're coming to me for rehabilitation, I want you to be as autonomous as possible because that's a higher ticket price, right? I want to be fair to your finances.
Yep.
And you normally are someone who can manage things better on your own. So you don't have to come see me frequently if I'm good at what I do, which
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I am.
W-
Um, but I also have individuals who don't feel as comfortable in the gym. I have a private facility. They want to be with me the whole time to make
mhm.
sure that, they've had a back surgery, they've had a knee surgery, they don't want to do the wrong thing. And I
Yeah.
can teach them all I want, but they just have a level of comfortability coming to me. Great. And I'm going to give them a great session. And then I feel like there's value because they value my time,
Totally.
not just the knowledge.
You've hit a lot of points on the head where it's like the whole goal of the performance provider growth model is not to put everybody on a virtual offer, a digital offer, whatever you want to call it. The goal is to allow flexibility to actually deliver the type of solution that a client needs.
Hmm.
Sometimes that means it's going to be fully in person. Sometimes that means it's going to start in person and move to a virtual aspect. Sometimes that means we're just going to say, hey, I actually don't think I need you to come in person. I
Hmm.
want to just work with you fully remotely. And I want to manage you that way because, I think we also look at it like the value is only to us in saving the time. But like the value is also there for the client to not have to come into the clinic multiple times per week, to be able to do things in their environment and really to be able to be very prescriptive in how we get outcomes, which I feel like I almost felt like I was put in boxes as a physical therapist. I was put in a box when I was in the traditional PT clinic. I was put in a box with how I was able to treat and get outcomes. And I just remember like I've always craved flexibility. I've hated constraints around my life, my schedule, my time. And that's really what kind of the PPGM has allowed.
Hmm.
One of the big things too, though, when we were working together was kind of like this revamping of like the business side of, your entity. What
Hmm.
was kind of going on there that you felt like needed restructuring, that you felt like needed some mindset shifts?
Oh, what wasn't going wrong? So much has changed in so little time. I felt very confident with my offerings online, even
Yeah,
if I probably was undercharging, which is something we talked through and kind of
yeah.
like worked through in my brain. Um, but I was also really struggling with like the selling packages and some
Mm,
of the things that just make it sustainable. Right.
mhm.
I don't know if it was like a guilt or like I had trouble with the money side of things asking for that much, but when you break it down, you are saving the person. And if you do it ethically, it is really what they need best.
Yeah.
And honestly, you're doing a disservice. What I've come to realize is you're doing a disservice if you're not selling them a package if they need it because they're less likely to buy one later, as you've taught me.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what was happening was I would get someone in for eval, do a pretty good eval, see them back maybe one or two visits, and then that would be it, and they would fall off. And they would get good,
Yeah.
but I knew I could do better,
Yeah.
but they would have been out of pain and 70, 80% back. And that's the expectation with traditional physical therapy is I'm out of pain and I
Yep.
can do most of what I want. So yeah, I'm fixed. When in reality, we know that there's so much more I can do to get them not only back to their baseline, but better on the performance side of things. And I was missing out on that last bit by not selling a package or selling a continuity plan, getting them into a virtual offer, or any one
Yeah.
of these ideas that your model teaches.
So much to unpack there, right? I think that I used to pride myself in saying I only need to see my clients for 2 or 3 visits and then they're good to go. And I didn't realize how that was going to crush the business and
Hmm.
ultimately make it unsustainable, right? Because when we're thinking about business, we need to balance these concepts of lifetime value an ethical, amount of visits that somebody needs to come into. And so the thing that did not resonate with me was like always finding, quote unquote, finding something to work on with them when I didn't feel like I needed that those extra sessions. Um, and it really allowed me to think outside the box and say like, okay, if I don't need 10 sessions, but I need the monetary value that 10 sessions provides, how can I change the service mechanism? And so for me, like a very common treatment plan was like 6 sessions plus 4 to 6 months of a prescriptive exercise program, which just felt really good. Like it felt really good, and it got me to a lifetime value where every client interaction actually made it sustainable.
Mhm.
The second point that you brought up there is a complete outcome component. So we talk about this a lot in the program, but as consumers start to feel better, right, the perception of value starts to drop, and the perception of cost starts to creep. And so if we get somebody out of pain and then we say, oh, by the way, we now have this other problem that we need to work on for $200 an hour that you can't see, you don't greatly understand, you can't feel the effects of it until it happens. And that problem is a poor chronic workload, a poor protective workload. We've missed the boat on delivering a complete outcome.
Mhm.
And so everybody talks about bridging the gap from rehab to performance, and like that's it.
Yep.
And the big component is that gap doesn't need to be bridged in person. That gap just needs to be bridged somehow, some way, right?
Mhm.
What have you kind of seen from a financial perspective in the business since we've shifted from, old mindset, old price points into now? I know a lot's kind of changed in your business,
Mhm.
but I think it'd be cool if you're comfortable talking about that.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing was it helped to level out some of the peaks and valleys. And that's something that any
Yeah.
provider probably feels quite a bit. We're recording this in December. This is like the time that people feel it the most. And for me, actually, it's one of my best months and best
Oh yeah,
seasons
man.
because it's also because I'm in that performance area, the time that
Mm-hmm.
everyone wants a New Year's resolution, right?
Yeah.
Coming back to your question, it getting more people on that continuity offer took a lot of the stress of where's my next eval coming from? I have to make this sell. I have to sell a big package because it's a slower process. Luckily, I'd been doing it for many years,
Yeah.
but each one of those individuals that joins the continuity offer, if you're providing high value with that continuity offer and you're doing a good service, the churn on something like that is very low. I
Mm-hmm.
have individuals that have been on my performance coaching package type of things that have been with me for 3 years, most of them 1 year plus. So I don't have to stress about, oh, I just lost 15 people. There's 50% of my revenue.
Yep.
It's I can bank on within a certain variability, that money's always going to be coming in for the next year. And then if I get those couple evals in, that's additional, or that's, my opportunity to like pay off some extra stuff in advance. So it just took so much stress off of it.
You
Um,
mean you mean starting each month at zero, trying to acquire new clients and collect session by session was a little stressful for you?
if I truly had to do that, I wouldn't still be doing this. I would have
Yeah,
picked up another salary job and I just wouldn't have been able to make it because,
yeah,
you know, fault of my own, I'm very bad at marketing. I don't take the time to do some of the social media things that I want, but luckily because of the model, I don't have to. I don't have to
yeah.
feel like I have to spend half my day just trying to like find new leads because that drains me more than anything. If that was my day,
Yes.
again, I would just go work for someone else, right? So it allowed me to do as much as I need to get the people, but then actually just be the clinician I want to be and also be the father and the husband that I want to be.
I think the hardest part for any business is acquiring new clients, right? I think that's the thing that everybody struggles with. And when you zoom out on, the rehab professions, you realize that the business model is constant client acquisition.
Hmm.
Now, when you look at the traditional rehab model, the pipeline flows in a much more seamless, voluminous way from physician referrals even if that ends up costing more to the consumer because they have to pay their deductible before they actually tap into any benefits. Like, I think people sometimes think like cash-based PT is more expensive, but I've seen many cases where it's actually much cheaper to go a cash route. And
Hmm.
I've been I have health insurance, and a lot of times I just pay cash for my medical services because I know what the bill is going to be, and my deductible is so high that like I'm not gonna actually tap into any of those benefits anyways,
Hmm.
right? Um, so when what we've kind of been able to do is we've turned what has traditionally been an acquisition based business. Client comes in with a problem, we solve it, we look for another client, or we wait until that client experiences another problem. And we've
Hmm.
actually turned our model into a retention model,
Hmm.
and clients come in for what they need, and then we end up that or excuse me, clients come in for what they want. We have to give them what they need, and then we keep them again with what they want.
Hmm.
We do the same thing in our business, right? Everybody that comes to us wants freedom, wants flexibility, wants recurring revenue. Cool. I'd love to give that to you. Before I'm able to give that to you, I have to actually give you what you need. I have to give you the skills of in
Hmm.
person operations. I have to give you the skills of stability. I have to give you the skills of sales. I have to teach you those things. And then when we have those things, we can take bigger operational, I want to call them risks, but we can take bigger operational changes and not be as scarce minded that we're now going to lose money or that we're going to lose a sale, because we have some stability as we kind of go through that awkward transition phase of operating in person to operating blended.
Hmm.
What's something that you feel has kind of been, unique about the experience of working together that maybe you haven't seen elsewhere?
I think just the message itself. And that's what convinced me to sign up. Like obviously our call, like I feel like we had a connection pretty
Yeah.
easily. It wasn't awkward or stressful, but just the messaging that you put out vibed with me because I'd been on calls with probably four other coaching businesses within the physical therapy realm.
Hmm.
And seemingly every single other coaching model was how do we grow you to this, 8-figure business with
Hmm.
18 employees and three different clinics. And I was going, no, like I want none of that. I at one point had coaches working for me, hated managing them. Like
Yeah.
I do not want employees. I do not want more clinics. I want small. I want lifestyle, which
High
seemed like
margin. Yeah.
yeah, and and the lifestyle model of business was like almost like taboo and like that's not what you
Yeah.
should do. But like that's what I want. Like, hey, yeah, there's some risks inherent. We talked off air, like I just had a child a week and a half ago. So if I'm
Yeah.
not working, I'm not making as much money. But
Yep.
I'm fine with that because then I also don't have to manage other people's problems.
Hmm.
Um, but your model was very much like how do we create the business for the life that you want without forcing these other ideas and expectations, right? It
Yeah.
was very much, yeah, let's create the lifestyle business and still be very profitable and very happy, but have the time to be a father, be a husband, chase your passions,
Yeah.
have hobbies, not be just a business owner.
Well, and for those of you out there thinking like, oh, well, if you did have another therapist, they could obviously just cover all your clients. Yeah, but now imagine if 2 weeks prior to having your child, your therapist said, hey, and by the way, I'm giving you my 2 weeks notice.
Hmm.
Like, the grass isn't always greener. It
Hmm.
is just a different set of headaches and limitations and scale implications that you end up running into, right? So, like, I talk about this all the time, but like, I'm not impressed by a business that has high gross revenue but low gross margins. I'd rather work with somebody who is making, 15, 20, 25K solo, but bringing home 90% of that,
Hmm.
rather than somebody who's bringing home, a million, $1 million a year, but is bringing home less than the solo practitioner. Like, to me, it just doesn't make sense in a service-based business like this. And there's nothing wrong with that model. We're just not the company to help you build that. Like, that's a totally different structure and framework and like you said, vibe and lifestyle. Um, So I think that there are a lot of people out there that maybe want that at some point. And it's also not a bad idea to start solo and lifestyle and create revenue so that when you go into an operating location, so that when you go to hire somebody, you aren't stressed that now you have to fill that client schedule, that you have to make a rent payment because you already have a baseline revenue that's kind of, underneath your foot, right? So like the version of your business that you build today doesn't need to be the version of your business that you build in 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Um, what's life like now for you as you've implemented the performance provider growth model? You have a blend of what I like to call rocket fuel, which is, your package revenue, and gas in the tank, which is your recurring revenue from your prescriptive exercise programs, your performance programs. What
Hmm.
have you kind of noticed that life's like now that you're able to do that maybe you weren't able to do before?
Take vacation in general, like blank statement. And that sounds super cliche, like the idea of like the entrepreneur sitting on a beach with his laptop, but most of my revenue is remote coaching.
Yeah.
So if I have internet access, I can be working. But I can also shift my schedule around because I'm such a low volume practitioner.
Yep.
I do not treat people on Friday unless there's like an emergency where I've had to cancel something earlier in the week. So my work week is Monday through Thursday, at least for the in-person stuff. Some virtual stuff kind of flows wherever it needs to. Um, so from the time that we signed up, which I'm forgetting the month, I mean, I traveled, I think 12 of 16 weekends this
Wow.
past year, either catching up on, for my own competitive schedule, for me coaching, for me seeing family vacations, any number of things, and I didn't miss a beat.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that working in a regular job. You can't
Yeah.
take off every single Friday for the entire summer, or some Thursdays, or some Mondays, and just having the flexibility to call my recurring clients, because most of the people I see in person are practically family friends at this point. Where I'm
Yeah.
sitting right now is my home gym, home office. People are coming to my house to be treated by me. They see my kids, they ask the wife how things are going. So if I text them and say, "Hey, flight got delayed. I'm not getting back Monday morning. I'll see you Monday evening. Is that okay?" Yes, no problem, right?
Yeah.
There's just so much flexibility. And I think that the term you always use is time flexibility, not time freedom, right? I'm still working. I
Bingo.
still have these commitments. It's just I get to choose when I do them.
There's nothing wrong with trading time for money. I want everybody to know that. Like, I think that there's a lot of messages out there that say, like, you should never trade your time for money. There's nothing wrong with that when you're being appropriately compensated for your time,
Hmm.
right? There's nothing wrong with that when you are working the amount of hours that you want to work.
Hmm.
Where trading time for money is extremely costly is when you're working a 10-hour day in a clinic that you're not paid for lunch. So it actually becomes an 11-hour day and you're making 35, $40 an hour and your entire day is gone when you could have figured out how to sell $350 sessions, made 12% more, and gotten 8 hours of your day back. That's where trading time for money is a huge problem. And I believe for you, you were working a couple contract jobs prior where that was your life, right? Like you
Yeah.
were,
I
you
was
know,
stuck. When I came to you, I was very much stuck. I was in that catch 22 of I don't have the time I need to make the money I need to be fully
yeah,
self-employed, but I also like I don't yeah, I
can't
couldn't do
make the money unless you
it.
sacrifice the time. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
well,
is
that was awful. And
that is classic.
for reference, I'm the sole provider, sole income, right? My wife stays home with her kids. We're very blessed to be able to do that, but there's a lot of stress, right? So, and
Yeah.
I know there's going to be people watching this video in my situation saying like, "Well, I can't do that. I don't have the luxury of having two incomes and taking that risk." And I delayed it for a very long period of time because of the fear of what if I
Sure.
fail,
Yeah.
but I didn't. And there's always, as a physical therapist, there's always backup plans. So.
It's funny. It's like the worst case scenario is you literally go back to your life as it is right now.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, run. Like, if that's the case, if you were thinking, what if my business fails? Go back to the life that you have right now. Okay, cool. You're right back in the same position, but at least you gave it a shot, right?
Hmm.
For those of you that are out there, I would just want to highlight single provider, single income provider.
Hmm.
James now has three kids
In New York State, where it's not cheap to
in
live.
New York. So, for those of you out there that have convinced yourself of the story that you can't do this, like you can,
Hmm.
it's going to take mindset shifts. It is going to take massive action. It is going to take believing in yourself. And it's going to take stop letting fear control you and start letting fear motivate you, right? And we constantly ask ourselves like, well, what if it doesn't work? What if it all goes wrong? We don't really think about like, well, what if it all goes right?
Hmm.
And what can I do to ensure, what can I do to put myself in the best position possible that it can go right?
Hmm.
I think that's huge. Um, James, anything that you want to kind of leave those listening with as kind of parting words of advice? Maybe there's somebody out there that's listening that's on the fence.
Hmm.
What's some piece of wisdom that you would instill in them as some parting words?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we could talk about all the like the benefits of doing what we did and why your model works very efficiently, especially for the person that's double dipping like I am in rehab and performance.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing, and this was my biggest hurdle, was the money of investing in a coach and how that's truly an investment, not a cost.
Hmm.
Um, I delayed and delayed, and you're never going to have enough money where you can justify. Because if you can justify dropping a couple $1,000s just without concern, you're probably in no need of a coach, or you're in a very good situation,
Hmm.
right? So I didn't come into this coaching relationship with just excess amounts of money, but I saved and reallocated and saw the value of having someone help me because I knew how much money I was losing out on.
Yeah.
That was the big thing. When I came to the realization of if I continue doing what I'm doing, I will not get to where I need or want to be.
Hmm.
Something has to change, and I don't know what it is. So I need to hire someone to tell me what it is. And it might be a simple solution. And in our case, it actually was. It was very quick, where it was like, no, everything fell into place and we're good now. Might not be the case for other people, but get creative, save the money. It truly is an investment into your future and your honestly health and happiness in my situation as well.
And I like to ask people the question that maybe have that financial scarcity. If you don't have the skills to change your situation to make the money, how are you ever going to stop this cycle?
Hmm.
I'll share a quick little insight on money scarcity as well. Like I do think that stuff also is hard to get over.
Hmm.
I actually just signed up with a new coaching program today. It's almost 10K, and it's still like I'm in a good financial situation. There's still like hesitancy to say like yes, and I'm gonna buy this thing, and I'm gonna do this thing, and I'm gonna pay in full. And the biggest difference for me is I used to be the person that talked myself out of it.
Hmm.
And now I become the person that says, if you want clients to work with you and be confident in their investment in yourself, you have to be the person that is confident with your investment in yourself.
Hmm.
And so it's understanding that like I don't just get the invoice and then say click done. Like I still have this process that I work through where I'm like, "Oh crap, like this is still a lot of money, right? Like this is still a lot of money." But I need to become the consumer that I want my clients to be. I
Hmm.
need to walk in with the authority that this isn't a lot of money, that this is money that flows through, my business and into somebody else's business so I can acquire a new skill to figure out how to do things better. So I think there's a lot of great lessons in there. And I think that I just want y'all to know that like everybody's working through this stuff. It's just those that can push through those thoughts that kind of keep you stuck, like James did.
Hmm.
Um, James, if people want to find you and learn more about what you do, reach out, connect with you, where's kind of the best place to do that?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram. My personal profile is J period Johnson period DPT. And then through there, I've linked my business ATP Performance, which on Instagram is ATP Performance Therapy, just blending the two together.
Sure.
And that's probably the best way to find me is through Instagram. Pretty active on there. Try and put out educational content when I can, but it's a lot of blended stuff of the family and my own, bodybuilding endeavors and all that fun stuff.
It's good. That's how it should be.
Hmm.
And for those of you that are looking for me, if you're here, I don't know if that's actually the case. But you can find us at engagemovement.com if you want to learn more about the performance provider growth model, the program that James just recently went through and has kind of transformed his business. You can find that there. You can always connect with me on Instagram at Ray Gorman DPT. DMs are always open. Love to have conversations and go from there. And if you want to just hop on a call, I'll make sure that the link is below in the caption. And we look forward to speaking with you. James, thank you so much for your time, man. I think everybody is going to really resonate with your story and be able to borrow a lot of confidence from it. So I appreciate you sharing it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
All right, thanks, brother.